You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. My friends, welcome to the big podcast circus tent in the sky. I don't know what the hell that means. We don't have lions and tigers and bears, but we do have brilliant minds that come on the show, and myself. I'm excluded from the brilliant mind column, obviously. Anyway, those of you who've been following the show for a number of years are like, yeah, he's pretty much gone. So we are glad to have you on the show. Be sure to go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. For the show to your family and friends, the downloads have been exploding. Like, people have been just referring the show, I guess. We were just kidding about that multi-level marketing. You have to have 5 people in your downline or whatever to subscribe to the show. We're just kidding, folks. That was a joke, eh? But some of you took it to heart, and I think we doubled. We're going to quadruple our traffic this year. It's kind of crazy. We double and triple every year since 2020, and it looks like we're going to quadruple this year. Anyway, guys, LinkedIn. The LinkedIn newsletter is exploding. Go see that as well on youtube.com. Today, we have a returning author on the show. He was here earlier for his book, Pandemic Incorporated, Chasing the Capitalists and Thieves Who Got Rich. Well, we got sick, and he's got a new article out on ProPublica.org called A Christian Health Nonprofit Saddled with Thousands with Debt as It Built a Family Empire, including a pot farm, a bank, and an airline. It's a huge, massive expose that they published there on ProPublica.org. And we have the co-author of that, J. David McSwane, on the show for us today. He'll be talking about all of his insights and everything that goes into him. And he's been with ProPublica and been a journalist for quite some time, doing all his good stuff and work over there. He's a reporter in their DC office. He worked as investigative reporter for the Dallas Morning News, where he reported on the state's outsourced Medicaid system. Get it right, Chris, which benefited companies that systematically deny care to sick children, disabled adults, and spurred multiple legislative reforms. Welcome to the show, David. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
There you go. Welcome back to the show, and give us your .com, wherever you want people to look you up and get to know you on the interwebs.
Go to ProPublica.org. That's where our work is featured. I have a bio page there. You can also find some of my work, including my book, at davidmcswane.com.
There you go. So what motivated you to write this piece? You know, you came off of Pandemic Incorporated. What motivated you to write this piece, and what was kind of the catalyst behind it?
Sort of the classic story of the pressure you feel after landing, a project such as a book or a big story. It's just desperation. You're looking for, what's the next story?
The next big thing.
Yeah, and my colleague Ryan Gabrielson and I just wanted to look a little bit more closely at nonprofits. It's really not a very well reported space. These are organizations that are tax exempt, and there are some records out there, but they're kind of squishy. Just having reported for years and years, you just sort of see there's always something going on in the space. So we thought we'd more deliberately take a look, and we were thinking more broad strokes. We'd look at the regulation as a whole, and just started poking around. I was interested in looking at religious organizations. He was interested in looking at healthcare, and almost randomly sort of found the intersection of the two and landed upon an organization called Liberty Health Share, which appeared to have just a ton of complaints online, Better Business Bureau complaints and so forth, and sort of seemed like there was smoke. I'm so sorry. I got something stuck in my throat.
That happens on a Tuesday morning.
Only when you're trying to talk continuously, right?
That's true.
That's what happens. So there were just things signaling that, okay, this is an interesting organization. It's called a healthcare sharing ministry. I had never heard of this, and in a previous job down in Texas, I covered insurance pretty extensively and knew about insurance. And this is built as an alternative to insurance. These ministries are essentially faith-based organizations of like-minded Christians. It sort of began with the Mennonites, who essentially say, we're going to work outside of insurance rather than pay United Healthcare and we all have a premium. We're just going to put money into this nonprofit, so when I get sick or I break a leg, they'll just pay for it. So conceptually similar, but completely unregulated. And right away, that just stood out to me as uniquely susceptible to fraud, which as you know, I've covered a lot of that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What was interesting to me, and you guys documented the article, and I think I remember hearing at the time, an Iowa senator or Iowa House member, was it Grassley?
Mhm.
It put a provision in the original Obamacare, and Obamacare was a proponent that kind of maybe drove people to some of these vehicles for funding insurance outside of the thing. And I think there was you wrote in the article that there was an exception pushed into the Obamacare bill originally to help these businesses that were religious based.
Yeah, you actually just gave me the perfect setup to pitch a story that's coming out next week that further delves into this. It's actually really fascinating. In that story, I got sort of an up close view with the lobbyist who got that exemption in, a guy no one's ever heard of, was working for these ministries that most people don't know anything about. And when I discovered that the exemption, it's about 100 words in a 1,000-page document, one of the biggest laws ever passed by Congress, is no one really noticed it. And when I traced it back to Senator Chuck Grassley, veteran, like famous for being a conservative voice against Obamacare.
Yeah.
When I found out it traced back to his office, I was kind of surprised. And when I called his office, so were they.
Wow.
This was quite a while ago, 13, 14 years ago. And that institutional knowledge just sort of turns over. And folks couldn't quite remember what it was. But, essentially, these ministries were pretty small, maybe 40,000 members around 2009. And Obamacare is coming together, and it's pretty clear it's going to have sweeping effects across the healthcare industry, right? And this is sort of the beginning of the coordinated GOP opposition to everything Obama, especially the ACA. So they hire a lobbyist. They want to make sure that whatever happens in insurance regulation, they can survive. And there was a thing in there that probably the most controversial piece of the Affordable Care Act was the individual mandate, which essentially said we all have to have insurance, whether it's through your job or you buy it on the marketplace. That would have effectively killed healthcare sharing ministries because they're not insurance. So they wanted to stop that and appealed to Grassley's office saying, we're religious. We're a group of Christians who want to help each other out. And what we're doing is good and it's cheaper. And we just want to make sure we can survive. So through some, behind the scenes, legislating, that exemption slips through and healthcare sharing ministries are not just saved, but they're really exempt from all of this new sweeping regulation that had a profound impact on actual insurance. So it really just created an opportunity for people to take advantage of this space.
Wow. Now I'd heard about these, and I we were talking in the green room beforehand. I couldn't remember where I'd heard about these collectives. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's the word I'll use. The collectives of health insurance, where it was based upon, I'd seen one version where it was based upon like Jesus' teaching of helping each other. And so the insurance company would collect, I think, premiums, but anything that was due like above that, people would sometimes have to write additional checks to support. Was this one of those collectives, or was it a more like an insurance company?
Well, so collective wouldn't be the legal term. But yeah, it's essentially what they were doing. They were saying, instead of giving our money as a monthly premium to a corporation, essentially, that has profit motivations, we're going to give it to a nonprofit, relatively small. Maybe there's a few hundred of us. And, we're all religious. We share the same faith. But it looks and acts like insurance. Insurance regulators would tell you this. They pay a monthly share. That share is just a premium. and the nonprofit holds on to that. In insurance, we call that pooling. And once you start pooling money, you're an insurance company. And they've managed to really sort of sidestep that regulation by arguing they don't pool members' money. They just kind of hold on to it for them, which is one and the same, right?
Yeah, if you send me $1 million, I will hold on to it for you.
Right. Yeah, I'll pull anyone's money. Let me know. Yeah, so
let me drop
they
my
look
Cash
and
App
act
really
like
quick here.
insurance.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying they look and act like insurance, but that religious bit was sort of their way out. And lawmakers, not a lot of people were in these things. People are reluctant to do anything that might look like religious persecution. And that's essentially what the early health shares argued is, this is us practicing our religion in a way. So if you regulate us, you're coming after Christians.
Yeah. And that was kind of a backlash of, well, I don't know if it was directly a backlash of when Obama kind of went after with the IRS, basically saying, what was it? If you're preaching or using your religion to infiltrate politics, you have problems. It seemed like there was a lot of backlash that came out of that. And of course, the GOP using Obamacare and Obama as a boogeyman and saying, he's coming after your religion, And it seems like a lot came out of that. And, for years you heard the whipping of almost 10 or 20 years or something. How long has it been? 10, I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah.
Last 10 years of, the GOP is like, we're going to stop Obamacare, which came down to McCain's seminal vote. But yeah, it's interesting to me what was going on with these companies, because they act like the people who pay into them, feel they're normal consumers of an insurance policy, that when they have claims, when they get some sort of thing, they have issues. You tell a story beginning in the article about a lady who that ends up happening to.
Yeah. So there was a lot there. So it was fascinating. It's sort of a theme throughout our story that there's this family, the Beers family of Canton, Ohio, and some associates who started. They almost invented health shares back in the day. They got busted committing some fraud and kind of disappeared. But it was that whole stew of things happening that you just referenced, of the GOP coming after everything Obamacare, the act itself, our shifting politics, that allowed them to just sort of slip under the radar and collect billions of dollars. So I found it fascinating because most people don't know about these things, but it was just our political atmosphere allowed it to happen. And then no one was looking at it. So you have people like Bonnie Martin, who you mentioned how we lead into the story, who it appealed to her, the Liberty Health Share appealed to her because she didn't get health insurance through her job, which is millions of Americans. The Obamacare marketplace has gotten really expensive.
Yeah.
So she sort of fell through the cracks, and here's this Liberty Health Shares offering something that looks like insurance, and it's much cheaper. So she bought into it, as hundreds of thousands have in this space by now. And it's fine until she needs something. And she's diagnosed with an aggressive cancer. And some of her bills are paid early on. This is when Liberty's sort of healthy and they're bringing in more people and more money. And that we're not yet seeing the house of cards, and goes into remission. She gets sick again, and now they just stop paying her bills.
Wow.
And in her case, she's told her illness is terminal, and she doesn't really want to believe it. She's fighting back against that. So we found these emails and notes, like handwritten notes, where she's pleading with Liberty to pay her bills because she doesn't want to go into debt and be sent to collections. And we found that these pleas just really went nowhere because money was being drained out of the nonprofit to fund these for-profit corporations and buy properties and things that are all connected to one family in Ohio.
Yeah. And the sad part about this is it's all sad when you really look at it. These people pay in premiums, they believe in it. But on top of that, they believe in the institution of religion and Jesus, and that these people are going to do good by them because they're religious, then other people aren't. I'm an atheist now, but I grew up in the cult and grew up in religion and all that sort of stuff. And so, I understand how people, they believe in it. I have family that still believes in religion, and, and they believe that the I call it a cult, their entity that they send their money to, is has goodwill from a Jesus sort of standpoint of we're going to do right by you. Recently, the cult was fined by the IRS and the SEC for hiding hundreds of billions of dollars or into a fund. You'll probably know which one I'm referring to, but they believe deep down, they have a trust. I'm trying to say that these religious institutions that are financial are going to be above board than, say, a Gentile sort of institution, if you will. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I found interesting is the audience to whom they're marketing is a devoted audience,
Mhm.
as you pointed out, through their faith. And I also grew up in the church, so I understand it. And, these folks are talking. They had their own little communities, and there's this sort of broad crossover we're seeing more recently with the right and things like CPAC and these other things. And
Mhm.
they found just a really great audience to sell to, of people who wanted an alternative for what they, viewed as sort of a scourge of Obamacare, who may need health insurance when it's really expensive. And, they had a lot of devotees, and, they used faith to market themselves.
Mhm.
And I did find that a lot of people who weren't Christian, Bonnie Martin wasn't a Christian.
Mhm.
It was just practical for her. It looked like a good deal, and it turned out too good to be true.
There you go. In fact, you mentioned CPAC. One of the pictures in your article shows one of the infamous photos. I'm going to call it infamous, of Trump plagiarizing and hugging the flag, which I don't think you're supposed to do. But and Liberty HealthShare is one of the sponsors of CPAC. This is 2019. It looks like. Tell us a little bit about more on that kind of incestuous relationship with politics and the company.
Yeah, I was talking to a source earlier today who, is a conservative. He said, I didn't really love that you included that photo, because a lot of us are conservative, and it seemed like a jab. And I was like, that's interesting that you thought of it that way. I actually did, and what I saw that as, here is an organization that founded out of allegations of fraud, comes completely out of obscurity to the highest stage they can really get to, next to
Hmm.
the president of the United States, as a lead sponsor of CPAC, which coincides with them wanting to preserve certain policies that allow them to exist. But also, there is no better advertising for what they were selling.
Hmm.
They went from nothing to one of the biggest sponsors of CPAC within like 4 years. So it was significant to me to see. I don't think the president understood what Liberty Health Share was when he took that photo. And I doubt a lot of people who've seen the photo thought twice about it, but
Yeah.
that gave them a significant stage to sell their wares and bring in more people and more money, and ultimately to to wreak a little more havoc on people's finances.
Yeah, there's another brand on here, Dragging Canoe Pigeon 4. I don't even know what the hell that is. It sounds like something sounds like something I'd find on the new advertisements on Twitter. It's like the bottom basement of advertisers over there. But what's interesting is the CPAC sponsorship that they paid to get on that board. They spent more than 200,000 a year, according to your article, between 2017 and 2021 to be a top sponsor at CPAC. Well, meanwhile, not paying, folks like this lady's bills who ended up dying of cancer.
Right, and that's the thrust of the story. I mean, what we really found was, they had some really clever marketing. They
Hmm.
had a really devoted audience, and they had people who were trusting and sending their money. And what happened is they set up, this family set up for-profit corporations that charged the nonprofit and sucked out millions and millions of dollars, which we've seen in nonprofits before. But what caught my interest was as we delved further and further and looked at property records and business filings that you file with your Secretary of State and so forth, is dozens of companies that appeared to be shell companies that don't do anything but move money and hold assets and all this stuff moving around. And we traced it back and we found all these interesting properties, a weed farm in Oregon. The family had purchased a controlling stake in a boutique airline outside of Canton that used to ship people from Canton to Atlantic City for a gambling weekend, but just happened to be hired to move migrants to Martha's Vineyard for Ron DeSantis' political stunt. So like the deeper we went, the more we realized this family that controlled this thing, members of this family had moved money through an array of assets and accumulated incredible wealth in just a few years. And, that money originated from people who might have been at CPAC and decided they were going to buy their product.
I do remember from reading the Bible when I was young that Jesus did say, "Thou shalt buy an airline and a pot farm." I'm pretty sure that was in Leviticus or something. I don't know.
Those might be their extra religious endeavors.
But you basically document this whole almost RICO-like organization of, like you say, shell companies, and the pooling of the insurance funds is clearly being redistributed and used, and these guys are getting rich and living with it. On top of that, I love how you document it. It goes back like two generations, 3 different iterations that they've done of this scam of creating these sort of insurance things. If you want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so the members of the Beers family of Canton, Ohio, who are intimately involved in the creation of Liberty and moving that money around, were already sort of infamous from something that happened more than 20 years ago in the 90s, but it started much earlier. A reverend named Bruce Hawthorne took the idea of a health share, which was really just like Mennonites, like hundreds of Mennonites might band together, and like someone breaks a leg, they pay for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Takes that idea and scales it and learns to monetize it. And people are paying each other's bills back then through snail mail. And by the mid 90s and into the 2000s, the Ohio Attorney General sort of got wise to what was going on here, investigates this nonprofit, which was called the Christian Brotherhood Newsletter. And that brotherhood, when they looked into it, was moving millions and millions of dollars out of the nonprofit and into a company controlled by one of the members of the family, Daniel J. Beers. And from there, they bought motorcycles and land and a family ranch and a jet and a bus and all these other things. So we saw that pattern, and the Ohio Attorney General recommended dozens of felony charges be filed against members of this family.
Wow.
And it just didn't happen. There was a new DA who was elected and some other things. But we found the original, my colleague Ryan Gabrielson found the original referral to the law enforcement referral that detailed this, in which they allege members of this family were engaged in money laundering and racketeering and conspiracy to steal. And when we read through all of those really old files, we noticed that Liberty Health Share and the companies that were pulling money out of it seemed to be echoing something this family knew a lot about from more than 20 years ago. So, we sort of walk readers through the origins of that, and you see how it sort of evolves, where, Liberty Health Share now has the internet and Facebook for marketing and all these other tools to get even bigger. But functionally, the operation looks a lot like the first operation.
Wow. And they're just hopping from different things. And they're going on, you have pictures of them going on bear trips. Evidently one of the guys loves to gamble. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the patriarch of this whole thing, who was involved in the Brotherhood and is also involved, our sources and documents show, in Liberty, though his name's not on anything because he owes a $10 million judgment.
Oh.
He's quite a character, and I had a chance to meet with him, where he sat down and answered questions about companies he claims he doesn't control or know anything about. But they like to have fun. He likes to gamble. He's pretty good at poker, from what we were able to find. He's placed in some tournaments, and the family, as they amassed all of this wealth, at the same time, Liberty members weren't getting their bills paid and were being sent to collections. They were having a good time. They bought a piece of a hunting and fishing lodge in Alberta, Canada. And, they weren't really hiding it. They posted photos of, 5 bears they'd killed as a family and some deer. And, just in the course of us doing our due diligence, we found those things. And actually, the hunting lodge was one of the harder things to find because we weren't looking in Canada.
Oh, wow.
And they have a different public record system. It was just sort of mentioned to me in passing by a source, like, hey, did you know about the hunting lodge? And then the photos confirmed it.
This is what I love about having journalists on the show and having you guys come on from reputable sources. I don't think I claim Fox News as a reputable source if anyone came on from them. I don't think we have anyone on from Fox News, but it's been interesting to see what the Dominion lawsuit has exposed. But the work you did on this piece is amazing and huge, and probably just the beginning of peeling the onion, maybe. But I was reading the other day about I forget who the Texas pastor is, but he was the guy who went and opened the church to the Houston hurricane victims, and then he finally relented after some public backlash. But I was reading about how much money he has, how many cars he has, and different things, and it's just extraordinary some of the games that are played in the name of religion and Jesus that end up enriching some of these dudes and fleecing a lot of people, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's an American tradition. And that's not to discount people's faith or religious institutions that do a lot of good.
No.
I've talked to a lot of people in this space who, they're upset. They want this stuff exposed because they want to do it right, and they believe they're following biblical teaching. And they want a cheaper alternative that provides some sort of faith-based community, and they're true believers. And then, as with anything, there's always somebody trying to take advantage. And when you add, sort of the trust that comes along with, I'm giving money to a fellow Christian or so forth, that's when it feels, I think that's when, people feel even yet more upset, like they were taken advantage of on a more spiritual level.
Yeah, they prey on these people. I mean, you see it in the Nigerian emails. They'll bring up God and all sorts of religious sayings, and they do it to establish trust or find people that are they're willing to give their faith over a little bit more to people who speak that language and think they're more trustworthy. And really, it's just preying on these people, which is sad and unfortunate. And why is there a chance that? Hopefully what you're documenting is going to get covered. Is there a chance the Justice Department is ever going to look into this stuff? Or is it, like you mentioned earlier in the show, it's a thing where you get in religion, then, you get the political backlash from the right-wing GOP.
Right. Those political conditions haven't quite changed. I mean, talked to some folks who are IRS experts or had worked at the agency. They're just not very good at policing nonprofits. It's not, the IRS is a tax collection agency. That's their primary goal and objective. And these organizations don't pay taxes. So they're not really hunting around for this sort of thing. They find things here and there and they'll ping you, but they just don't have the capacity for that, we're told. And then on top of that, you have the perception, largely perpetuated by conservative media, that the IRS was attacking religion. So I think there may be a reluctance there. I don't have anyone who's explicitly told me that. But I certainly think there's a lot there that law enforcement may choose to look or to follow up on, or maybe even the Ohio Attorney General's office, which has in the past, has some familiarity with, with this organization and with this family.
And it seems like regulators on a state and federal level have just not really wanting to regulate them. They're kind of like, they're kind of over on their own thing, so just let them do that. But if you're in the normal insurance regulation business, you have tons of regulations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was a pretty clever pitch early on,
Hmm.
really beginning in the 90s into the early aughts. The industry argued, we're this religious group, we're really small, you shouldn't really worry about us, we're not insurance. And insurance regulators have a ton of, they're policing, $100 billion corporations, and it's different state by state. It's really complicated stuff. I think they were more than happy to just say, okay, we don't need more homework.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting what goes on in this world, between stuff, the SCOTUS rulings, of course, as the court's gone more right wing, approving different things, Citizens United, and different features of rulings where you can just buy politicians, you can lobby like hell to get what you want. It seems like businesses can just go do almost whatever they want and not really face many penalties. The Mormon Church, which I referenced earlier, they just recently, earlier this month, paid $5 million to resolve the SEC case for stockpiling $100 billion in total holdings, hiding it from the IRS, hiding it from other places. They were hiding it mostly, they claim, from their members because they were worried that their members would stop sending in money. And I have members of my family that I'm like, why are you sending money to, I think they were exposed years ago at being one of the top 10 real estate holding companies in the United States. They probably have so much money, no one can put a finger on it, but so much money, you're just like, why would you send that? And they're literally getting off now with $5 million over hiding $100 billion, and
Yeah.
they're just gonna get off on it. And it's just crazy that people can, these businesses, and it is a business. The Mormon Church is filed as an incorporation, as are its shell companies. um the, it's just extraordinary these people can walk away from it. Yet I think if personally one of us did that, we'd definitely be doing some jail time.
Yeah, it's just practically it's easier for law enforcement or a regulatory agency to go after, individuals that are easier to prosecute and
Hmm.
sort of seek a deterrent effect, make an example out of someone. And there's also, a culture of accepting settlements because litigation is, tedious, expensive, takes forever, and there's only so much capacity you have. So I think it's just kind of a human thing that makes a lot of sense. And um, in a way, it's job security, because the last line of defense often is journalists who, you know, we obsess over things and
Yeah.
can get to the bottom of it. And it's not our job to make a case. It's our job to just point out what's happening and then let others act.
Yeah, without the fourth estate reporting this stuff, people don't, let's say, appreciate journalism as much as they should, because without it, we wouldn't know about a lot of these abuses, and some things get resolved, some things don't. But it's really important that we find out about this stuff, and there needs to be more outcry. I mean, people need to go, this is bullshit. I've constantly read, and a lot of it's between the lines, that the reason they don't go after billionaires and rich people and stuff is because they kind of hire 50 million attorneys to fight them for decades. There's
Mm.
still, I guess, $100 million refund that's still unresolved with the IRS, and we're still trickling out with Trump as to how he used to abuse the IRS. In fact, to look at his own files that came out. So it's really interesting what you've put in here. What else have we teased out or covered in the article that people should read?
Oh boy, it's a long article, admittedly, but we've gotten a lot of engagement with the story online. It's
Hmm.
still up on the homepage. I'd encourage people just to check it out. There's a really cool animation that walks you through the logistics of how money was sucked out of this nonprofit. One thing I found really fascinating is, as we were tracking all these companies and following the money, pretty journalism 101 stuff, so it took a while. Uh, Came upon a bank that members of the family purchased
Hmm.
in the Missouri Ozarks, and I just thought, why do they have a bank? And we found that it's central to their next business venture,
Wow.
which it's complicated, but they're essentially trying to make sure they have an end run around insurance regulation forever, because
Wow.
they could not, they could get around pooling money. And the bank is central to that. In the moment, right, in the months after, members of the family purchased the bank, there's been an exodus of executives who weren't comfortable with how that's going down. So that's something we're going to be looking at, see where that goes. And of course, they've now invited bank regulation, which is, much heavier than the space they exist as just a healthcare sharing ministry.
Yeah. And you talk in your article about how it took much longer than normal to get their bank thing approved, but now they have access to borrowing money from the feds, from the Federal Reserve, and doing their banking stuff, and maybe, I don't know, maybe some interest. Wouldn't that, if a drug cartel was running that, wouldn't that be called money laundering? Maybe, I don't know. You gotta worry about what they might be doing with that bank.
I don't think we ran into any drugs, but we're eager to see,
Yeah.
what banking regulators say about,
Yeah.
the plans for the bank.
Yeah, and I'm just using the example. I mean, if it was a drug dealers doing it, I mean, definitely the feds would be all over it. But I think there's real big concern with what they do with the bank, and trying to legitimize the money, and I imagine all these companies you outlined that these people bought with shell companies controlled by the family conveniently. None of the profit from those venues probably flows back to the original insurance company pool that they stole it from or took it from. Maybe it's a proper word.
Yeah, once money leaves the nonprofit, we have a very limited view.
Wow.
Because those records aren't public, and you can find things in land records,
Mhm.
Elsewhere, and stitch it together. But it would take law enforcement and subpoena power to really track everything.
Yeah, because they're private companies, so they don't have to disclose all their open stuff, and how much. It's really interesting how they've there's no laws against this stuff. It's crazy. It's just freaking crazy. Or if there seems to be reluctance on prosecutors to go after it.
Yeah, the Ohio Attorney General entered a settlement with members of the family and the nonprofit after accusing it of fraud, and there are laws against that. For reasons we don't know, they didn't answer our questions. They didn't pursue criminal charges and instead went with civil litigation.
Mm-hmm. Is there any indication that I mean, your article is fairly new, but some of the fallout might motivate some people might prosecutors to take a deeper look at what's going on there?
You never know. I mean, it's been my experience. When you throw something out there like this, some prosecutor somewhere follows up and wants to take a look at it at the very least. I
Mhm.
don't know that. I don't have any confirmation of that. But I think we've put a lot out there that might be of interest.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have laid it out probably in a way that a lot of people haven't looked into it. With the Mormon case, there was a whistleblower that was overseeing the funds that came forward and said, this is wrong and unethical, and not really something probably Jesus would pull off. I've read the Bible. I'm an atheist, but the Bible is like still a good how-to manual at how to be a good person in life. For the most part, I don't know about the Old Testament. Maybe I don't know. I have to revisit. But the New Testament kind of, when Jesus comes around, he's like, hey, don't lie, don't steal, be good to each other. That sort of the golden rule.
Yeah.
That's a good way to do. But of course, I'm a Gentile heathen of atheism, so I'll be worshiping the devil later today, I guess, or something. Whatever I think I do. Those are jokes, people. We're just kidding around. Anything more you want to touch on or tease out, David, to get people to read the article, check it out, and find out more about what's going on?
No, that's it. Check it out at propublica.org. We have a newsletter where you can sign up and get updates on our other investigations as they come out.
There you go. And people who want to join our devil worshiping cult. No, I'm just kidding. We don't have one. I'm just an atheist. We don't believe in anything. Anyway, folks. Thanks for coming on the show, Dave. We really appreciate you coming on, and your insights into this are amazing. We've had a lot of authors that have come on that have exposed a lot of stuff going on in religion, the right wing stuff, what put Trump in office, and a lot of this stuff that seemed to come out of Obamacare and Obama, and some of the exposing some of the abuses that are on there. So it's good that you do this and do the great work of journalism for it.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
There you go. Please come back for the next book or whatever the next big thing is, David. Thanks, Mounts, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Go to LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Subscribe to the LinkedIn newsletter. That thing is killing it over there. It's huge. It's public now. They made it so that everyone can see the newsletter instead of connections. And so usually it's our great interviews that we do here. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you guys next time.